doing some work with some individual instructors, and they said, hey, you need to go to the PGA show. And I was like, all right, I'll go, and met some good guys, and never thought I'd be in this position where I'd actually have people coming to hear me speak. So I'm very honored to be here. And it's when David and I started talking about it in November, we started talking about different ways of looking at the mental side. And what I want for tonight to be is really about your question and answers. I didn't want to come in here and just throw something against the wall and see what you guys said. I want to try to give you some different insight from my perspective as being a psychologist working with athletes at all levels. And I work across many different sports, and I'm going to tell you my background in a minute. Some of you have heard my story, so I may tell it again, I might not. But I want you to ask questions. And so most of you are golf coaches. I know we have a statistician here. We have an LPGA player here. Haley Millsap has been a long-standing client of mine. And I'm fortunate enough to have my team at Greystone Golf and Country Club in Birmingham here. I've been a member of Greystone for 10 years. And we have a phenomenal team. We have Hank Johnson's been there for many years. He's moved into the instructor emeritus position, and we're honored to have Mark Blackburn joining us as director of instruction in Birmingham. And so his team is here now, and so we've got some great stuff going on. So I'm happy they're here tonight, smiling at me and making fun of me. But honestly, the truth of the matter is this talk is about answering your questions about what it takes to compete, how to take your players, whether you're working with juniors who just want to get into the game, if you have tour players or and the like, and I may throw things to Haley at some point, but it's talking about the way that different things go. And I'll tell you my background a little bit, but I also want you to understand that I'm probably not the norm when it comes to psychologists. I didn't go into the field purposefully. I was a baseball player at LSU. I was a member of 2 national title teams and 3 SEC title teams and pitched in the College World Series. And the thing about me was I knew I didn't have the talent to compete at the level at LSU. And I knew that the players that I was competing against had much better talent than me. Even though I was 6'5" and at the time 230 pounds, there were guys who threw the ball 8, 9, 10 miles an hour harder than I did, and they could make the ball dance a lot different than me. And I'll never forget sitting in Coach Burtman's office, who was a Hall of Fame baseball coach, and he was the head coach of the '96 Olympic team. And he was interviewing or talking to me with my dad. It was April of my senior year in high school, and he asked us to come in, and he said, "You're not good enough to play at LSU, but I'd like you to come." And my dad's rule was, I've done all this. My dad was a retired lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, and his thing was, I've done everything I can to make him a man. It's your turn to help him get there now. I'm turning him over to you. And what Coach said is, you're not good enough to pitch this year. We have guys coming in like Steve Carsey and guys like that who are much better than you. And I don't think you're good enough to pitch next year either. But if you're willing to be patient, I think by your 3rd year, you can be a major player on our team. And I remember leaving with my dad and saying, I just want to play at LSU, so I'm willing to make that sacrifice. And it was hard. My freshman year, we redshirted. I redshirted, and we won the national title. And I played with guys, if you're Major League Baseball fans, I played with guys like Mike Sorotka, Paul Bird, Chad Auger. And on that pitching staff, there were 7 major leaguers. And I was the guy who just did stats. And we took stats of everything. I ran the radar gun in the stands. Every pitch we threw that year was radar gunned. And so I did those, and I did the stats for the pitchers. And then my sophomore year, I came back, and I thought I was going to be I thought it was all going to work out. It was going to be great. You know, this is what the Angels are going to sing and make it work. And I only pitched 3 innings that year, and ended up getting sick with mono and missed 6 weeks of the season at the end and missed a lot of school. And it wasn't until that off season where all of a sudden things got easier for me, and the game was simple. And I came back for my junior year. And I was going to go to law school type of guy, and I came back for my junior year, or my 3rd year, redshirt sophomore year, and my fall season was phenomenal. I broke camp as the 3rd starter on the team. The game was easy. Everything I did was perfect. And I remember leaving that fall season thinking, this is what baseball is all about. You see it, you throw it, the ball moves, it breaks, it does everything it's supposed to. And the last inter-squad game, I pitched an inter-squad after the LSU-Alabama football game. It was November 8th or 9th. And it was about 32 degrees, and we had fans at the stadium and everything. We were preseason number 1, and I dominated the game. It was awesome. I'll never forget that night. I walked off the mound, and I was pretty much awarded the 3rd starting position, 3rd starter as a pitcher. Hey, guys. And so I did all that, and I came out. The next morning, I went to comb my hair, and I couldn't get my elbow and my hand high enough to my head. So my shoulder was locked. And they diagnosed it with intense tendonitis and an impingement in the shoulder. And I probably tore my labrum. But I pitched through it, tried to pitch through it, through 10 innings that year, and really lost velocity, lost everything. The game, which was so easy, became so difficult for me. And it was very demoralizing. I threw 10 innings, we won the national title, and I remember thinking I could have been the guy on the mound, and it was hard. It was really, really difficult for me. And I came back the next year and went in the fall, and it was the worst fall season of my life. I went from throwing up to 90, and I was throwing 78 miles an hour. Average college pitcher throws 88 to 89 to 90, and I was throwing 78. I couldn't get the ball over the plate, and when I did, it just didn't go. And I was ready to quit. And I was in a position where I just didn't like the game anymore. And I remember thinking I'll just become a coach, because I knew the game. I knew my advantage in the game was trying to outsmart the other team. And our coach in college, Skip Bertman, was a master of the mental game, about doing the things that nobody else was willing to do. And he used to always say, if we as a team will do the things that no other team has the guts to do, we'll always be on top. And no other team has the guts to invest in their mental game, because they're too weak. And so we would do things that other teams wouldn't do. And so we went about doing it, and we kept working, and we kept fighting and all that. And I came back, and my parents said, look, before you quit, because I was about to quit, before you quit, I'd been dating my now wife, and it was awful. And my parents sent me to a guy who was a hypnosis guy. And not dating my wife was awful. And it was, they took me to a guy to teach me how to visualize and relax. And I hated this stuff. I was a hardcore scientist. I was a science nerd. My dad was a pharmacist as well, and believed in science, and psychology was a bunch of weirdos. And they still are. And so I went in and I worked with this guy, and I was ready. The game was so bad. I mean, it was miserable. And we were about 2 weeks before the season, and I was throwing my bullpen sessions with our equipment manager. And our equipment manager was only there to lock up the building when I left. And the beginning of the season started, and I found something in the bullpen where I kind of locked into what this guy, I'll never forget his name, McCabe Williamson. He was a Northern Irishman. He's passed away now. And went and met with him, and we kept working. And then all of a sudden, I went into the first weekend in a game, and the game all of a sudden slowed down, and it got easy again. Now, my speeds were way down. I wasn't throwing hard enough, but I could get guys out. And I went through the first game, and good. Went through the next week, good. And my life changed when Nolan Ryan showed up at Alex Box Stadium in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Those of you who heard my story, I'm going to tell it again, so don't let me bore you. Nolan Ryan's son, by the name of Reed Ryan, was pitching for Texas Christian University. I see the bag right here. It's kind of funny. And we all ran out there with the baseball and had him signed. And I remember going up to Nolan. He had been retired at that point. I said, will you sign my baseball? And he's like, whatever, and signs it, and he walks off. And early in the season, you kind of know when you're going to pitch, and you kind of don't know when you're going to pitch. Or you know when you're pitching, you know the days you're not going to pitch. And I knew I wasn't a starter. And my job was what was called an outs eater. When we got a big lead or we're way down, I was going to go in and eat outs to save the bullpen. And our starting pitcher, who was the all-time winningest pitcher at LSU, very close friend of mine, got in trouble in the second inning. And I ended up coming in relief in the second inning with the bases loaded and nobody out. And I went out there and I got out of the inning with no runs scored. I could get out of other people's messes. No problem. You made a mess? Wayne, I was going to fix it. And I ran off the mound, and I remember Coach Bertman waddling out of the dugout. He had 2 arthritic hips, 2 hip replacements. And we had about 7,000 to 8,000 people at the game. And it's night, and I am pumped. And he walks out, and he puts his arm around me. He goes, you want the good news or the bad news? So give me the good news. He said, that's the best inning I've seen pitched this year. The bad news is if you walk this leadoff batter, I'm taking you out of the game. And he turns and walks away. And I remember thinking, like, you son of a bitch. Because you would never do that to other pitchers. And what he knew about me was the year before when I pitched, I came in relief during the previous season. I could get out of anybody's jam, but I would sit in the dugout and be afraid to succeed. See, I didn't have a fear of failure, I had a fear of success. And fear of success comes with a lot of more responsibilities. Because when I sat in the dugout, I used to think, if I do well again, if I go back out there and do well in this inning, he's going to put me in against Auburn, he's going to put me in against Alabama, of Cal State Fullerton. I don't think I can do that. I am going to let down my teammates. And I'd go out there and I'd get stressed. And I'd screw up and I'd get taken out. And I was so good at failing, it didn't bother me. Because it was always, well, I always had the excuses. Well, whatever. And I'll never forget running in the bullpen that night thinking, I cannot believe this positive coach, this master of the mental game, is telling me to not walk the leadoff batter. So I remember sitting in the dugout, just worried about it. I ran back out on the mound, and every warm-up pitch I threw, I would sit there and say, that was a strike. Oh, that was a strike. Yeah, that was a strike. All right, good. Ball goes down to second base, and now the tension just went right on me. And I take the ball back. I get on the first pitch, high, ball 1. Second pitch, high, ball 2. I said, you're not going to do it. You're not going to take me out. Ball 3, ball 4. And I look over, and he comes out of the dugout, takes the ball from me, and says, you're not strong enough to pitch for me. And I go run in the dugout, get in a fight with the bench, which is what a good pitcher does. And he took me out of the game. He said, you're just not good enough. You're not strong enough. And I was done. I was demoralized. I remember sitting in the dugout that night thinking, people are, why would you take me out? I just got out of a bases-loaded jam with nobody else. So the next day was a beautiful day, and we drove to Mandeville, Louisiana. The 6 pitchers who pitched that night, the night before. And in fact, Nolan Ryan had credited the pitcher who came in relief of me for winning the game. And it crushed me because he was my hero. And I remember thinking, I just wanted him to mention me, wanted him to, and we won the game big. We killed his son. But so the next day we go to Mandeville, Louisiana, which is an hour and a half away. The pitchers knew that we weren't going to throw. So when you know you're not going to pitch, you don't really put on all your lucky stuff. You don't wear the right undershirt. You don't put on the stuff underneath your pants. Your socks aren't taped. Your ankles aren't taped. You don't do any of that stuff. You're wearing tennis shoes. You're there to do charts and just chill out in the sun. So we're coming back listening to the game. Pre-game, and our GA goes, hey, would you guys like us to stop at McDonald's and buy you guys McDonald's? Well, college students, yeah. How many can we get? As many as you want. All right. That's why I ended up in this position. And so we're driving back, and I get a Big Mac, and I'm listening to the game, and our starting pitcher from that game, Bhrett had won the national title game the year before in a 9-inning complete game shutout as a true freshman in the national title game with 3 hits, no runs, and 16 strikeouts. Dominating. Well, I'm not going to pitch. So I'm walking back in the stadium eating the Big Mac, and he's in a little bit of trouble. And the equipment manager turns the corner and says, Bhrett, Skip wants you in the bullpen, go get loose. I put the hamburger down, I put on my spikes, and I run out into the bullpen and I get loose. And I go into the game that inning. And I come in relief again with the bases loaded and nobody out, and this time I strike out the side and get out of it. Statistically, pretty tough to do it 2 days in a row, right, Rich? So, if you don't know Rich Hunt, statistician extraordinaire. So I come in and I get out of it again, and I think there's no way this dude is going to do this to me again. And he waddles out of the dugout and he puts his arm around me and he says, you walk this leadoff batter, I'm taking you out of the game. And I went in the dugout, and my roommate, who was a 3-time All-American and played in the major leagues for 13, 14 years, he said, no, man, don't worry about it. You'll get it, whatever, it's no big deal. And it killed me, because he wouldn't do that to other pitchers. And at that point now, I was starting to get really mad. So I go into the dugout, and I sit and sulk, and everyone's like, come on, you can do this, whatever. And I go back out on the mound, and I walk the leadoff batter on 5 pitches. And I look in the dugout, and he's not coming out of the dugout. I'm like, all right, now, every pitcher wants to work out of their own messes. That's a sign of respect. You get in trouble, let me work out of it. Well, Skip wasn't going to let me do that for long. Short leash, I was going to hang myself. And I did. The next pitch, the guy hit off the wall. And when the ball hit off the bat, Coach Bertman came out of the dugout. He was notorious for waiting for the batter to run and just keep walking by. He didn't care. And he takes the ball from me and says, you're scared to death to pitch. You're scared to death. And I ran off the mound and I pouted after that game. And I went back to McTavish Williamson and I said, I'm struggling. I don't understand. Why would he do that to me? And he said, I don't understand what the problem is. He said, what are you trying to do? And I said, well, when you go out in the inning, you don't want to walk the leadoff batter because 60 to 70% of the time the leadoff batter scores. You don't have to put many hits together to get the run to score. And in college baseball, that's important. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And so I don't want to get the leadoff batter to walk because then I'll be aggressive after that. If I can get over the pressure barrier, then I can be me. He said, I asked him, what do you want to do? If he was a perfect environment, what do you want to do? I said, I'd love to strike the guy out. That's like the ultimate slap in the face of a hitter. Strike him out. He said, well, then go for that. I said, oh, you don't understand. If I try for it, then I know I'm going to mess up and walk him. If I can be conservative, I know I can be successful. And he goes, your mind doesn't work like that. Your mind only works when you fully engage to what you want. And I remember sitting there thinking, going, well, I got nothing to lose now. And I changed my mentality that day. The mind only does what it's fully invested in wanting to do. And I changed my mentality, and I ended up finishing the season in the top 10 in just about every SEC pitching category. And in the SEC tournament, I came in relief against Arkansas. I was the first guy out of our bullpen. I hated starting because it was too stressful. I like being in trouble. And I would come in the first inning or the ninth inning, it didn't matter. And I had gotten the save against Alabama the night before. We were still in the SEC tournament hope and the championship hunt. And I got out of a bases loaded jam against Arkansas with nobody out in the eighth inning. We were up by a run. I was good at that. My senior year, I only gave up one inherited runner. And I came in after the game. They interviewed Coach, and I was in the press conference. And they said, "How did you know that Bhrett McCabe could do that?" And he said, back in March, there were 2 games that I challenged him to start pitching to what he wanted instead of what he feared. I knew he could do it. And we went to the World Series, and I pitched in the World Series that year in live TV on ESPN, which was absolutely mesmerizing and fearful. I've never seen a stadium that big spin that fast, and it did spin. Second pitch went by my ear and kind of woke up as the line drive went past me. And after the season, I changed my major to psychology. And I said, I couldn't get over an injury, but I sure figured out how to deal with my fears, and I think there's something to this stuff. So 2 years ago, I went back and interviewed Coach Bertman, who's now retired. He ended up retiring as the athletic director at LSU. And I said, "Coach, do you remember when you changed my life?" The 3 heroes of my life are my mom, my dad, and Coach Bertman. And he said, "March 1994 against Texas Christian University." I said, "How'd you remember that?" He said, "Bhrett, I waited 4 years to push your buttons." He said, "What you got to understand about coaching is that it's my job not to teach you, it's my job to coach you. It's my job to find out what you fear, what your buttons are, and know when to push them. And more importantly than that, to know how many times I can push it." See, I waited 4 years. You didn't believe you were as good as you truly were. You had an excuse with your injury. You didn't believe you were that good. He said, "I knew at that point you had a safety net of teammates around you that would not let you fail." And because of that, I became a psychologist. I went back and did my PhD in LSU in clinical. I'm unlike 95% of the sports psychologists out there. I'm a real psychologist, which means I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm licensed by my board. I have to answer to an ethics committee. I have a license. I have to do continuing education. And I don't mean that as a slight against other folks. It's just it's a different degree path that I took. I was trained in hospitals, working with medically ill patients and chronic pain patients and people with headaches. I did my internship at Brown Medical School up in Providence, Rhode Island, which was probably one of the top 2 or 3 internships, and I BS'd my way into it and survived. And then I worked in pharma for 10 years, doing medical research and education, understanding how programs develop. And I was fortunate enough to create a program at Bristol Myers Squibb before I left that was the largest ROI in the history of BMS with one product. And because of that, I left. But during that time, I started working with athletes. And was very fortunate enough, Hank Johnson, who was at Greystone, gave me my first couple clients, and then started growing. And players like Bobby Wyatt, who shot a 57 in Alabama golf. Eric Eshelman, who connected me with Graham McDowell, and I was fortunate enough to work with Graham for a year after he won the U.S. Open and got him through some struggles at the Atlanta Athletic Club and got him up into the next U.S. Open. Now I got a couple clients on tour, on the LPGA tour and developmental. Now the athletic department psychologist for the University of Alabama. I was at Ole Miss and doing some consulting, and now Alabama's got me. It's very hard as an LSU Tiger to say roll tide, but I can roll tide when the green rolls in. So here's my question for you guys tonight. I told you the story about how Coach Bertman changed my life. You guys are golf coaches, and we got some players, we got statisticians, we got fitness coaches. But you're coaches. See, I wanted to be a coach. Deep down, every day, I remember I wanted to be on the baseball field. I wanted to hit fungos. I wanted to work with players. I loved coaching. I taught baseball lessons through grad school to make extra money. And I remember talking to Missy, my wife, and I remember saying, I really want to coach, but it's going to take 5, 6, 7 years to establish myself. We're going to be really poor, move around a lot, and I don't really want to do that. And I ended up going into psychology, was really poor for 7 years, moved around a lot, and it's full circle, and I'm back doing this. I love what I do. I have the greatest job in the world. And so I ask you, what's your job as a coach? I think golf coaches, I come at it from a completely different angle. I think the word teacher needs to be gone. Your coaches. The era of the swing coaches, the guru, needs to be gone. The player's the guru. Your job is to coach them up and be 3 steps ahead of them at any given moment. So the player freaks out about where they are today, you need to be thinking about where they are next week and how to get them there and how to manage those emotions. Your job is to coach and not be caught up in their emotions. And I don't mean that negatively, Haley, but you guys can be pretty emotional, and you need to be. Fair? Okay, there's a lot of pressure on the line. But your job as coaches is to navigate them and to guide them and understand the buttons that are there that they have and push them and know when to push them. See, they look at a Nick Saban as a football coach and go, boy, he just berates guys on the sidelines. Watch the games. He doesn't. He knows when to put his arm around a player, and he knows when to push. A.J. McCarron needed his rear end slapped to calm him down. But C.J. Mosley needed his arm put around him. And you got to understand your players. Every player that comes into, you have the opportunity to change their life like it happened to me. And I bet every one of you has somebody like that in your lives that changed your life. And make them understand that there are opportunities that each one of them have, and how are you going to build a plan to get there. One of my biggest accomplishments, I'm honored Haley is here, is to see where Haley is today from where we started. Fair? Unbelievable. And I'm more proud of her off the course than I am on the course because of what she represents as an individual. That, to me, is success. Okay? Your job, and I'm going to ask you a question, then we're going to finish it up tonight, is let me ask you what your charter is as a coach. We look at companies, and I walk into Chick-fil-A, their culture is lined up immediately on the wall. No question. You know what their culture is. What's your culture? What's your charter as a coach? What is your purpose? When you're coaching players, what's your long-term vision of where you're taking your players? For me at the MindSide, the company I own, is about developing players on and off the field to reach the true excellence they all have within them. And if it means transitioning them out of their career into a new career, then I'll step every way with them. To find the true success that they have, I'll do that as well. And I spend a lot of my time with players off the course than I do on, because I want them to be balanced on and off. But each of you have a charter. It's not just teaching kids how to swing a golf club. It's how to see their true potentials in what they do. And my goal in tonight is to answer some of the myths, the questions, the thoughts that you have. I may agree, I may disagree with you, but I will be honest with you, okay? And I want to challenge you. The field of psychology is where strength and conditioning was 25 years ago. It's way behind. It's way behind. There's great books out there to read. There's great things to understand. You can learn a lot by reading things outside this area. For instance, reading Daniel Pink's book called Drive, reading the talent books, whether it's Daniel Coyle's book or Talent is Overrated. The Sports Gene is a brilliant book about how certain kids just have the ability to do certain things. That doesn't mean they're always going to be successful. But I tell players all the time that the mountaintop gets very steep at the top. And it's just like climbing Mount Everest. The longest wait is the wait right before you get to the top. They wait in line to climb that last step. And in truth, they're only up there for a very short amount of time. But the greatest athletes get back down and they go, when are we doing it again? They're not afraid about coming down. They just can't wait to get back up. So, David and I, what we'd like to do tonight, if there are any questions, we want to open this up. I will stay here as late as y'all want to tonight. I got nowhere to go. So I want to answer questions. I think we've got Twitter going, and if you hashtag MindSide, it'll be there. So, any questions to get started before we turn it over to the MC?
Follow up?
Okay, we'll start.
In an ideal world, what part should parents play in their child's sports? And from your perspective, how do you see that differing from what's actually happening?
So the parents' role? Golf is tough. My wife and I struggled with this with my daughter. I have a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, and both are interested in golf. And Sally Christian, who's here tonight, was Logan's first golf coach. She was at Greystone. It's such a small world. It comes back around. And it's tough because as golf, there's nothing organized. See, baseball, I signed up for baseball, went to an organized practice, and you hoped you got a good coach. But at least they rolled the ball out there and you had an organized practice and you fed off each other. Golf is a very solitary sport. There's no team. The college concept of team golf is artificial. Because I want all my players to want to beat all their teammates. I still want them to win the tournament. So parents play a very unique role, and I think in today's world we've over-specialized our kids way too early. And we've made them realize that what we didn't have as our kids. I mean, I didn't grow up at a course like Greystone with 36 holes, 2 different grasses, tremendous driving ranges. I went down to the local playground and played baseball in the back, and if we had 9, if we had 6, you couldn't hit it to right field. You did stuff like that. And it's about getting kids out there and explore their true capabilities. So as parents, I have a rule for my parents, they're not allowed to talk about the game for the first 30 minutes after they leave an event. Not at all. Doesn't matter what the parents say. It doesn't matter what the kids say. We have a 30-minute rule. With my players on tour, we have a 3-hour rule with some of them. They're not allowed to tweet us or text us for 3 hours after they're done. Why? Because they're way emotional. They're not rational, and parents aren't either. So parents' job is to trust the people that are teaching them, to take them, to ask if they're interested, and then if they aren't, invest with them. But it's not a mandate. If they quit for a while, they'll come back to it if they truly love it. The worst thing is to make them, is parents trying to live their life through their kids.
Bhrett,
Yes.
From a coaching standpoint, how do you know how far you can push somebody, a student?
How far to push a student? So I'm a very big believer in failure drills. Okay? There's a new set of research that's come out by Angela Duckworth from University of Penn called grit. Now we get what grit is. We've all known what grit is. Not, John Wayne, but think about John Wayne. All right? The guy had grit. And so players, we coddle them. We don't want them upset. We don't want them to experience anything. And this whole society is about kids not skinning their knees. My wife and I used to always talk, look, you can't keep your kids from falling down the stairs. They do it once, they'll never do it again. And moms are like, oh, I don't want my babies to get hurt. But kids in practice have to understand failure, because without failure, they'll never truly appreciate success. If all we do is give them opportunities to be successful, they don't know what it's like to struggle. So you got to understand your player first, and we're going to talk about understanding your players. But you have to set them up to fail. Now, I want them to be one step away from succeeding, but to fail in certain drills. Now, not all the time. I'm not always setting them up to fail. But I want them to do drills that are tough and to find out what that grit is. And Angela Duckworth, when she did her studies, she looked at kids in the inner cities about who succeeded in schools or not. If you haven't seen the TED Talk that she did, it's fantastic. And her research is really good. She hasn't written a book yet, but it's coming. And what she said was, it wasn't IQ, it wasn't socioeconomic, it wasn't all these other factors that we always want to say. The kids that were successful in school, it came down to a thing that she researched called grit, which is stick-it-to-itness, in the easiest way to put it. When faced with a challenge, which kids are willing to go harder and say, I don't quit, I'm not quitting, I'm going harder, I'm going further. Like, I refuse. If with the Rubik's Cube, they don't go, I'm done. Okay? They're not searching the internet to how to break through Angry Birds. They're figuring it out on their own. And you want kids to stay in it and keep trying. Well, then she explored the research at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point and looked at kids who entered on their freshman year and who succeeded. And it was grit. It was the same factor. Well, I think my big belief with golfers is we train them historically. Golfers desire their best rounds. That's all they fight for. I want to shoot the 62 to 63. My belief is that will come, but we have to train them when they don't have it. And my job as a sports psychologist is to train that kid when he's 3 over par, and then all of a sudden kicks it into gear and says, I'm going to take a 76 and make it a 73 and stick around for the weekend. And I'm going to do that on Thursday. I don't have to have my great day. It's what remind me, I'll talk about riptides in a little bit. But it's about having these beliefs that the stick-to-itness. So for a kid, I don't want them leaving in tears often. But once every now and then is not a bad thing if the kid comes back. And if he comes back, then you know you can push a little bit more. We can't hold our kids and our players with gloves on. They have to experience difficulty. The easiest thing, what we do as coaches, and when I work with golf academies, like junior academies, I give all the instructors little notebooks. And I say, when you see something, write it down. But don't speak about it. Because as instructors, we see it, we want to fix it immediately. Then we want to see the next thing, we want to fix that. And what you're teaching them is there's always a quick fix. There truly is, but we're complicating it. I want them to go, I can't figure this out. Give me a minute, let me take a break, and I'm going to get back in it. So you've got to push them to the area of frustration. Yes?
My dad used to say, you can never get to good without going through bad.
Absolutely.
I think you're saying.
Well, and I'm going to tell you, my 3 stages of learning follow this pattern. Let's think about anything we've ever done. We start a new swing. You bring a new student in, and you see that there's a major problem. Now, I don't know much about the technical golf swing, and if you saw me swing, you'd realize that I like to swing hard, I like to hit it hard. And if it'll stay on the mat, that's good. If I can get it timed at the right time, I'm good. Pretty fair, Steve? Okay. So, and so, learning follows these 3 steps. You bring them in, you give them something simple. Their mind is clouded. And when people are confused and they're struggling, they complicate things. They don't simplify. They put 15 thoughts in their head. So you give them a little something, and all of a sudden they go back out, and it's simple. They're hitting balls, it's like, makes sense. And they're in what I call the honeymoon phase. It's easy. It's so simple. And you're like, got it, good. And you as a coach feel good about yourself. Good. Woo! And we get into what I call threat aversion. Oh man, don't like that conflict. Good. They're happy. I feel good about myself. We all have a shot of dopamine in our head. We feel good, reward. Yay! And we relax. And then the guy goes back or the lady goes back and they start hitting balls again. And now they're moving into what I call the fog. So it's up a little bit and then it hits the fog. The fog is that moment of time that is absolutely critical for learning success. Because it's that time where now they've moved out of the honeymoon, they're applying it in new contexts, they're trying new things, and now they're getting a little confused. And that little confusion becomes big confusion, and it becomes big frustration. And you all know those players where they're freaking out. And if you work with tour players, Tuesday night and Wednesdays are really tough in our household. Fair? Because the phone starts ringing. I can't figure it out. It's going to be awful. And you just, whatever. They're in the short term. But in the long term of making a swing change, they get into that area where they go play, they keep testing it, and they're in the fog. But it's critically important that for learning to set in, you have to go through frustration and confusion. For learning to set in, you have to go through frustration and confusion. Because only then do you find out how it translates to you to find the solution and enter what the last stage is, mastery. Honeymoon, fog, mastery. Now, you go into the doctor and you have an ACL surgery. And I work with Dr. Andrews' group in Birmingham, Alabama, so pretty well known, and he's an LSU grad, which makes it better. And he comes in and he does your ACL and he says, Wayne, you're going to be on the couch for 4 months. And at first you're going to feel good because your knee's not going to be hurting. But about the 2nd and 3rd month, it's going to get really bad. We're going to be breaking a lot of scar tissue. It's going to be bad. 4th month, it's going to start getting better. But long term, you're going to be great. And what do patients do? Well, they're going to try to beat it, but they get it. Why? Because Dr. Andrews has done thousands upon tens of thousands of knees. And if he's telling me, it must be true. And it's an expectancy bias. Okay, so now all of a sudden he goes, well, it starts hurting. We did this research with drug effects. You give a patient a new medicine and you say, look, first night you're going to feel dizzy. Don't worry about it. 15% of people get dizzy. And when you get dizzy, don't worry. It's just part of a side effect that'll go away in 3 days. They don't call in and they stay on the medicine. But if I don't tell you about getting dizzy, I ain't ever taking that drug again. And they freak out and they don't trust you anymore. So what I like people to say is, look, you're going to feel some immediate results. It's going to work in your swing. I'm so happy it's working now. But you're going to go through a time where you're going to get stuck. Keep coming to see me. I'm not trying to build my lesson book. But trust me, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to carry you through this. And when you find it, it's going to come crystal clear. And I'm here to ride it with you. And they'll enter mastery. It's so important. So important. So I do agree. You've got to get in there and get your hands dirty. And then what happens is that confusion becomes simple. Yes?
Have you ever heard of Lee Gurris Brain State Technologies?
No, but I'd be interested. What is it?
What he does, you've heard of the alpha, theta, beta,
Sure.
and so forth. There's 7 different waves. He divides it into 10,000. Now, I ask the question of women, and they get the answer right away. If you're going to go and meet somebody that's a very important meeting, what's the last thing you do? 90% of guys don't get this answer. But women do, and you'll probably, when I tell you, the last thing you do is look in the mirror.
Right.
Because you want to make sure you're good. Now, if you have
And men know we're good, so we just
if you have a problem with another person, and you don't know what you're supposed to do, you're really not quite sure, you review everything. the last thing you do before you go meet with that person is maybe talk to somebody you really trust so that they can be your mirror again.
Sure.
What brain state technology does is it takes those brain state, 10,000 breakdowns, and it iterates them and it converts them into sound and light,
Okay.
so that you now can balance your brain.
I know what you're talking about now. Yes.
And the interesting thing is that a balanced brain makes the best decisions it can
Sure
with
does.
what it has. And those things that unbalance a brain are such things as drugs, alcohol, but emotions,
Sure.
fear, anger, any of those. And when you control those, you have
So-
a lot better chance at
And you're exactly right. The brain works to create what's called synchronicity and stability. Okay? But players have to be players have to be comfortable in the sea of ambiguity in order to be successful. We can't stand discomfort. Okay? It's very uncomfortable for the brain. The brain is constantly scanning. You got to think about it like a security system in your house. It's constantly scanning the sensors to see what's working and what's not working. And so it's always trying to create stability. And that's important. What you're talking about is controlling. One of the things, controlling that synchronicity. One of the things I'm a big believer on is what I call the funnel of focus. And I don't have a flip chart, but you can imagine it. If this is the shot right here, we want our brain to be really, really focused. So it's like the tip of the funnel. But before the shot, it's going to be wide open. I don't believe that players can spend 5.5 hours walking down a golf course with the same mentality each and every day. And I find that what they do is that they're talking to their caddies or they're walking down, checking out stuff. They're thinking about a whole lot of stuff. But that funnel has to be wide open. And the first step, it's 4 steps for me. It's called awareness. Awareness leads to a strategy, which leads to execution, and then we measure results. Okay. So the first step of the funnel is wide open. Now what influences that filter of awareness? Well, those are things you're talking about. Emotion, past history, memories, expectations, demands. Do I want to be out there? All the many thoughts. And we have to make a choice of what comes through that funnel. We have to be aware of it. And players will say, the word, I've heard this all the time. And it's and if you knew where the original source came from, you'd laugh. The mind doesn't know what the word don't mean, doesn't know what the word don't is, and all it hears is the second half. That's total garbage. That came from a textbook of a hypnosis person with absolutely no scientific research to back it up, and it's so quoted that it's become folklore. It's wrong. The mind does know what don't means. What it says is, well, why not? Okay? I can tell you don't do something, but why can't I do it? It's not that I want to do it, it's why can't I? Because it creates instability and dysynchronicity. Okay, so now it's trying to figure it out. So a player says, oh, I don't like this hole, or don't make a bogey. That thought pops in our head. Because why? Our mind's wide open. It's wonderful, it should. I don't want them to say, don't have that thought. I want them to say, be aware of it. Oh, yeah, no kidding, I don't want to make a bogey. But now what do I want to do? I'm aware of the thought. I'm not getting mad about being mad. I'm not getting frustrated about being frustrated. I just am. If I'm angry, if you hit me, I'd be mad. But I wouldn't sit there and go, why did Wayne hit me? I get so mad at myself when Wayne hits me. No, I'd be like, I want to beat him up. And athletes, what they do is, why does this always happen to me that I get mad in the middle of a round? You hit a bad shot, get mad. Be aware of what you're feeling. Then from that, develop a strategy and then bring it to execution. Well, if we're thinking about left brain, right brain, analytical, performance, left, right. Where players struggle though, the funnel is flipped. When they're struggling, their funnel is very narrow at the top. They're aware of one thing and one thing only. They're uncomfortable and they want to get out of it. If I shut this door and I started putting smoke in here, every one of you are going to start looking for the exits to get out. You're in discomfort. And think about an athlete the same way. That's why you have to be in that fog of learning to figure out where you're going. The funnel is upside down. The awareness, I'm hitting it bad, I got to fix it. What's my strategy? Fix this. And by the time you get to execution, you've got 47,000 swing thoughts to try to make it happen. What I'd rather them do is flip the funnel and make it go the right way. And say, okay, be aware of it. I'm swinging like crap. I don't have my feels. I don't have all that. What's my strategy? Pick a conservative target and be aggressive to it. Now execute it without fear of failure. And if it's great, it's great. If not, we redo it again. Okay? So that's important.
So would that work if you're trying to get yourself out of quote unquote playing golf swing versus?
Absolutely. When you're playing golf swing, your funnel's flipped. And use that imagery and say, okay, what am I? I'm trying to make a swing. Why? Because your funnel is wide open. What you're not trying to hit a shot. You're trying not to screw up at that point with golf swing. Okay? So your funnel's upside down. That's why you bring a lot in. Another question? Yes?
I think the word mental toughness gets thrown around
Big
pretty
time.
loosely.
Yes.
I run a junior golf academy, and I deal with, I've got like 40 kids that come in and out of my program every day. I'm wondering, what I've always struggled with is that unless you can get that synergistic deal with the parents where they give you the freedom to be tough. I've lost clients because I
Sure.
do
And you don't need to have them all.
very bad, similar to the things you're talking about, but even the ones that, even the parents that are giving me the freedom to be a little bit tougher and to do the things on the kids, the minute they leave my environment and go back out into the real world where they're ultra protected and nothing bad ever happens to them, and then they go out on that golf course for 5 hours and the game gives them nothing, and they have to work for every single one of them, every stroke, every up and down. What I'm wondering is the modern day kid extremely in a very bad place when it comes to this game in particular because it's not a team sport and he has nowhere to hide.
The game is like baseball. It's a game of failure. You're going to hit 72 great shots, right? No, wrong. Even on a great round.
Right.
I mean, Jordan Spieth, where did he finish today? First, yeah. I mean, he didn't hit all great shots. He just was able to deal with less than perfect shots and made him really good.
Right.
So, we have to continue to,
I guess my question would be,
thank you.
I think we can agree that the kids are in a dangerous place and who knows why they got there and that's not the topic, but I think, I guess my question is, what would you do to enhance being tougher? Because the way
You need to be authentic. Here's the deal as coaches. We don't have to be right for everyone. We just have to get a higher percentage than that we can do the best with. If it's 10 kids that we can be good with, and authentic and respectful. Here's my rule. Players can call and fuss at me. They can call me out on things, and I'm fine with that as long as you're respectful. You can disagree because I want to know what you're thinking. And as parents, I try to tell the kids, look, I'm not going to chase you. I'm not going to find you. You got to come to me. And I'm going to tell you like it is. I'm going to be honest with you. Some people I'm really hard with. Some people I'm more buddy-buddy with. It depends on what they need. But I'm authentic to me. And that's what I am. I hope that I've never sacrificed who and what I believe in order to get a client. I've never handed out cards at a tournament. And if I'm at a professional tournament, I've never approached another player. I believe that they will come find me when they're ready. I don't believe in that. That's my culture. That's my values. You have to know what your values are. Remember that charter? What's your values? So are you going to try to appease every parent? Now remember, we have a society where parents do kids' homework in order to get kids to have higher grades.
Sure.
What are we preparing them for? To go to college and struggle? My wife and I have had a long conversation about my older daughter. Her psyche is not to be the highest achiever and to be number one in her class. She's just like me. I was in the top third of my class in an all-boys Catholic school. I never pushed. I never tried. I only started pushing in school when I changed my major to psychology. I know my older daughter. If she gets in that AP class, she's smart enough to be in any AP class she wants. But if she's burdened by that stress and goes to college as a sophomore instead of a freshman, we got problems. She needs to acclimate in school for a year and take the regular classes and then move forward. So you have to understand. Now, that answers another question. How well do you know your players?
Pretty well.
Okay. How do you know them?
Well, I guess just the constant rate of exposure I have to them.
That's good. So one of the things that I asked Coach Burton about is he said, do you guys remember, y'all used to think I'd walk the outfield and pick up balls and throw them back in and thought I was just BSing with y'all? I was learning everything I could about you in a safe environment. I'd come up to you and talk to you about your girlfriend. I'd come and talk to you about your parents. I'm not a big believer in rating scales, okay, and personality assessments. And the reason is that unless they're validated for the reasons that they're created, which validation means you start with a lot of numbers, a lot of questions, you narrow it down, you do statistical analysis about predictive values, and you keep going further and further. Okay, so I'm not a big believer in that. What I am a big believer in is you understanding what you're assessing and how you're answering it. Okay, so get and ask their questions. You can be wrong, but by being wrong, you'll get right a lot more. What I would do with a player is talk to them. what's going on? How you doing? And things like that, and take notes. If you're not taking notes on your players, you're not going to remember them. And you can remember the things that are important. You know that this kid is going through a divorce and has trust issues with his mom and his dad who's picking him up. Are you going to push that kid? No. You're going to build him up. You got another kid whose parents are making him a perfectionist. Then you better get him learning to fail pretty quickly. Right. And you start building it that way. Rating scales aren't going to give you that. The only rating scale I use is the Grit scale by Angela Duckworth, because I think it's great. Any other questions right now? You want to do a Twitter one?
Yeah, we have our first Twitter question.
Okay. Go. You want me to ask it?
Yeah, the question is, what common mistakes do you see golf coaches make that drive you bananas?
Well, they don't hire me enough. That's the first mistake. The one thing I think one mistake golf coaches make, I think, is that they feel like they a lot of times have to be everything to everyone. I think you just need to be the best at what you do and ask for help and colleagues to help you on the other things. I don't think you have to be everyone to everyone. From a teaching standpoint, golf coaches, I think that they try to buffer their players and freak out when the players are struggling. I think that's a big issue. It's hard when players are particularly professional or missing cuts. It's hard, but it's coming. And it's hard for them to trust, that it's coming. Think about Jimmy Walker on the PGA Tour. He played many, many years, and all of a sudden, bam, bam, won twice in a row is going to be a Ryder Cupper. Jimmy Walker. And most people thought he was an alcohol. So you gotta think it's coming. And through that, you look at Ricky Fowler right now. Ricky Fowler is struggling. No question about it. Being exposed on the South Course yesterday. Give him time. If he sticks with it and Butch doesn't push and doesn't give in, be strong to your authentic of who you are and believe, and teach them to trust you and not giving in to their emotion. I think that's a big question. One thing I want to talk to you about real quick on that, if there's other questions, please stop me, is I keep turning on Siri and I don't mean to. How many of you have ever been caught in a riptide? Tell me about it.
On my honeymoon, and
Thought you were going to die, didn't you?
well, I thought it was cool because it was in the Pacific Ocean. And it had,
All right.
it was at the Pacific Oceans, and,
Yeah.
and it had signs up and down the beach that said no swimming and surfing. And all of a sudden, I look back, and my wife was like that big, and I was that way, and I was going towards, I was in Cabo San Lucas, and I was going towards the Sea of Cortez, and it was a pretty cool experience.
You are one messed up dude.
Well, once I figured it out. And,
Okay. All right. Anyone else ever been caught in a riptide and had an authentic experience? What were you taking while you were down there? Tequila. So Destin, Florida, beautiful beaches. Never been to Destin, you got to go. It's really, just don't tell people about it. It's still a secret. I was down there with my daughter, and there's a sandbar, and because of the hurricanes, you have different sandbars. Well, sandbars are absolutely the reason why riptides occur. And Hale, you've never been down there, been caught in a riptide?
No.
Really?
Well, I've never had to, I've never had.
Okay. So my daughter was like, I want to go out to the sandbar. So you swim, maybe 40 yards max. We walked out. And I'm 6'5", we're walking out, and I've got her, and she's bobbing, and we're up there, and all of a sudden we come back, and I start walking, and I'm under the water. And now she's panicked because my head went under the water. Missy comes out there with our other daughter, and we're not 30 feet, 40 feet offshore, and the water's pulling us. We can't go anywhere. I can't touch. My daughter's starting to grab me around the neck, and we panicked. And my father-in-law had to jump in and come get us, which is a really bad thing because most people who jump in a riptide end up drowning. And yet, we were probably 10 feet from the sandbar, which was behind us, that was at ankle-deep water. The mind panicked. And the whole thing came, I'm going to die, it's going to die. And we probably would have died. It was a scary feeling. And we're sitting out there, oh my God. And all we could do was swim harder. And the harder we swam, the more tired we got. And it was terrifying. Think about your golfers who get caught in riptides on the golf course. They're playing along, everything's good, and all of a sudden the events change, and they go bogey, bogey, double. They're in a riptide. And what is their whole mentality? Their whole mentality is trying to get out of that riptide as soon as possible. They're swimming harder against it. They're trying to do things. They're speeding up. Their mind is going a mile a minute. And the whole time they're doing it is slow down, slow down, slow down. You know what? When you're going fast and you tell yourself slow down, don't do it. I'd rather turn and engage it. And what they teach you to do in the riptide is take a deep breath and then swim parallel to the shore, and the water will bring you back in. What I tell my golfers when they're in a riptide, remember that funnel? Be aware of it. Go, oh crap, I'm in a riptide. In a riptide. Okay, what do I do in a riptide? What's my first aid kit? Well, I put the ball in play. I get aggressive on my swings. I communicate more. I pull it back in because it takes one step to create momentum. That I've now created momentum. See, we think it takes a whole lot, and that's where we get caught in the riptide. It takes one step. One good shot, two good shots, bang, here we go. And you're out of the riptide. But what happens is most players drown in the riptides on the golf course because they're trying to fix it, swim against it as hard as they can. Have them recognize it first. And literally I'll have them say, oh crap, I'm in a riptide. Good, what do I do? What's my first aid kit? I breathe, slow it down, verbalize my shot. By the way, having players call their shots out loud, fastest way to engage the mind in the visual cortex and shut off the prefrontal. And then be aggressive. Doesn't mean you're gonna hit the first shot perfect, but it will rebuild the momentum. Riptides are very, very dangerous for golfers as well. And they lose their focus on them. Okay? Other questions?
I want you to go back to where you were talking about, like, I've always thought the mind cannot focus on a negative.
Sure.
But it can, when you have when you have a negative thought, don't hit it in the water, all of a sudden you've created a positive thought, which is the water, instead of the positive. So kind of go back on that.
So let's talk about focus for a minute.
Okay.
Focus is not the ability to ignore things. It's being so locked in on one thing that nothing else matters.
Okay.
That's focus. So if I stand on the tee and I go, oh crap, there's water left, I've been hooking it today. Where did I just put my focus? On the water.
Yeah.
Now what do? I'm going to play golf to avoid water. And I've not one time decided what I wanted to do. I'd rather you go, there's water left. Oh crap, I like to pull it. Okay, slow down, Bhrett. I don't want to hit it in the water. Now what do I want to do? All right, come back, slow down, and verbalize, slow down, pick the shot I want to hit, and get so locked in on that target with no fear of consequences, and let it ride. And it'll work. I mean, Haley, it works. You got to communicate it.
Okay, to build on that thought,
Okay.
the scariest thought for, I don't know, just a lot of people is when you're putting on a putting green, you don't give a crap. You can drain everything.
Sure.
Once again, you go back to where's your focus, but what is the most important thing when you look at focus? I always think of Steve Nash, the way he shoots free throws, and that's kind of how I teach people to focus on putting. Just screw it, oops, I shouldn't have said that, but screw it, and go ahead and just hit it, and who cares if you miss, but that's the attitude I have.
Well, I want players,
So how do you get your players to focus?
So putting for me is an odds game.
Okay.
And those that have done aim-point clinics know this. I swear the next aim-point clinic has to be in Vegas because we have to be on a craps table. Because putting is like craps. All right. How many of y'all play craps? All right. So you get to the line, come out, roll, whatever it's called. I love craps, don't remember the names. You roll it. And you get on a hot table, and everybody's excited, and everybody's, yeah, those are the days everything's going in.
Yep.
But percentage-wise, what's going to happen?
Eventually 7's coming up.
Eventually. All right. Do you change your strategy?
No.
Why wouldn't you change it? 7's got to come up eventually.
You just write it.
Ah. Okay. Now the table goes cold. Okay? Probability-wise, it's got to go cold at some point. When you hit a lot of 7s and you keep crapping out, do you change your strategy?
You start betting don't pass.
Well, okay, and then everybody on the table hates you. Okay, but people start betting more conservative on the odds. There's not as much on the table.
Okay.
What are you missing? What will you miss? You'll miss the next hot streak. And by the time you let up and go, we're on a hot streak, you've now missed it again. Vegas makes their money on people who change their strategies. My uncle was a pretty good craps player. He said take 40 times the table minimum so you can ride the hots and the lows. Never change your strategy. He was very successful with it. Putters, when you step up over it, you believe you can make everything. Every putt has a percentage of make in it. Some just are higher percentage than others. So when I sit over a putt, I want to make every putt that I see. The reason I love aim point is that it gives you a strategy of how to make it. Now, whether or not you can do that is a whole other thing. But I love aim point for that reason. So when I have a player step up over it, it's a game of percentages.
Okay.
And they have to see it as that. So if you miss 4 in a row from 10 feet,
Well, it's like flipping a coin. If I
Only
miss
goes
4 in
off
a
to
row,
10 again. I
I'm
guess it only goes for 60
due
minutes.
to make them all.
so let's talk about that now. Rich, you're gonna have to make sure, you're gonna have to test my stats. You know where I'm going with this? Okay, what is that? Can you all see that?
That's
Bell
fun.
curve.
A bell curve, normal distribution.
It's my paycheck every
It's your paycheck, yes. Okay. When Tiger Woods is at his best, his bell curve was this. Okay? Very easy. Very tight, very consistent. The ranges of his shots were very minimal over time. You could pretty much predict, course adjusted, tournament adjusted, that you knew where he was going to finish. A mini tour player is right here. Right there. They're all over the place. There's no consistency. So what I try to get players to understand is that golf, putting, everything is a bell curve. It's a normal distribution. This line right here is your mean, your median, and your mode. It's your average. The median, if we took all your scores, all your shots, whatever you want to apply this to,